On Tuesday, June 23rd, 3 more U.S. states will have their primary elections. The last in this block is Utah. The focus for the 30th episode in our series, analyzing the 2026 congressional primary elections for all 50 U.S. states. Utah has a population of around 3.5 million people. This gives them 4 seats in the House of Representatives. Currently, all their reps in the House and Senate are Republicans, as well as their governor. They don't have a Senate seat up for election this cycle. While all 4 districts are currently Republican, Utah is another state that made recent changes to their congressional map. This happened as the result of a district court judge's decision favoring the plaintiffs in the case to shift one district back to a Democratic majority. However, after seeing previous actions by Republican legislatures and governors in Louisiana and Alabama canceling their primary elections to reschedule different maps, who knows what map will be active when or if Utah votes. The main difference between the maps involves Salt Lake City, an area with a larger Democratic majority. The city has been fighting this battle constantly in the last 10 years or so, and probably even longer. In 2018, they were represented by the 4th District by former Congressmember Ben McAdams. In 2020, McAdams would lose re-election, not because he is an uninspiring corporate-backed liberal, despite he is. No, he lost re-election because in 2020 the maps were redrawn to once again split Salt Lake City into 4 Republican-controlled majority districts. Although, to be fair, in 2020, the race was very close. Had McAdams been a better, more inspiring representative, maybe he wouldn't have lost that seat. The map was changed further again in 2021 and used for the next 2 election cycles. For now, the new map approved in 2025 is active and currently represents the districts the candidates are running in for today's video. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th districts will most likely remain Republican. Geriatric incumbent 74-year-old Burgess Owens is retiring, and the 3 other Republican incumbents are still running for re-election, but just shifted districts. For all 3 of those districts, there is a Democrat for each seat running unopposed in the primary. Sadly, none of them were inspiring enough to talk about, and while I would like to see them win in November, they probably won't, but it's on the candidates to prove me wrong. They need to be more inspiring and earn more voters, and without policies worth voting for, they're not going to do that. That just leaves us with the 1st district to discuss. They have 4 candidates running in this district, including the former Congressmember Ben McAdams. Before discussing those candidates, let's first discuss the primary process the candidates and voters must navigate to win. Utah uses a standard partisan process, like in most states, but they allow the political parties to decide who may participate in their primaries. As of September 2025, the Democratic Party uses open primaries, while the Republicans use a closed primary. This means if for some terrible reason you want to vote for a Republican, you have to be affiliated with their party. For a Democratic ballot, you just have to be a registered voter. For the candidate to win, they only need a plurality of votes. Whoever gets the most votes will win. No runoff elections. The registration deadline is 11 days before the election. If you're watching this before June 12th, there's still time for you to get that registration sorted out. And you don't have to register as a Democrat if you don't want to. But I'd still recommend voting for the Democratic candidates. But even after the 12th, it still won't be too late. Utah allows same-day registration on Election Day. While this series mostly focuses on congressional races, there are no doubt other state and local level races that you'll be able to vote on. This video should be a component of your political research, not the totality of it, because voting is important and requires our participation if anything is going to improve. For those in Utah's 1st district, you have the opportunity to elect a fantastic candidate. But once again, in classic lefty tradition, there are 3 progressives running, splitting the way for the return of the liberal do-nothing Democrat. The approved candidate is Nate Blouin. When reviewing candidates, this is the criteria I use. Good candidates will have several of these policies listed on their campaign website. The more, the better. Great candidates will discuss these policies nonstop at town halls and other local events with constituents and during interviews. These candidates are the ones most deserving of the spotlight and your vote. Any candidate endorsed by one or more of the trusted political groups also helps strengthen their case for approval. The more groups that consolidate around a progressive leader, the more likely their campaign can win the primary in a crowded field. Take Chris Rabb, for example, a great candidate who won recently in Pennsylvania's 3rd district, or Adam Hemingway in New Jersey's 12th. In Utah's 1st, as mentioned, 3 candidates meet the approval criteria based on their campaign's policy platforms. They all support Medicare for All and a variety of other important progressive policies. Of these 3, Nate Blouin, a current state senator, has the most endorsements by these trusted groups. At the time of this recording, the 3 groups are Leaders We Deserve, Our Revolution, and Track AIPAC. One of the other progressives, Liban Mohammed, is endorsed by Citizens Impeachment. Sadly, another race where I find myself disagreeing with them. And the third progressive has none. In the case of Farrell, he has a progressive policy page, but not much else going for him. I noticed Nate Blouin's campaign early in the 2026 election cycle. While balancing work at the state senate, he has been actively campaigning and sharing his message through social media and various interviews. While I find Nate Blouin to be the better candidate of the four running in this district, the other two progressives in this race, just by them being there at this late stage, will split the progressive base. There is a local media source in Utah called Cure, or however it's pronounced, but they did interviews with all four candidates, and I'll provide links to these articles, the debate, and other discussed references in the video description. Michael Farrell is a tax attorney, and Liban Mohammed is a younger candidate who did public policy work at the American Heart Association, Meta, and TikTok. These might not be terrible candidates or even terrible people, but only one candidate is going to advance to the general election. And again, there won't be a runoff election. The candidate with the most votes will win. Now, Nate did take the initiative and showed leadership on this problem by stating the reality of this, going as far to say he would exit the race if the polling showed him behind one of the other two progressives. Now, there are some problems with how Nate went about this. It was done last minute. Farrell nor Mohammed didn't have any interest in cooperating. In Liban Mohammed's case, one of his reasons for staying in the race, and something he also heavily leaned on during the recent debate between the four candidates, was his win in the April 25th nominating convention. Utah is among several states that have convention processes in their elections, sometimes also referred to as caucuses. During the nominating convention on April 25th, Liban Mohammed did win. While the specifics aren't shown here on Ballotpedia, the Cure article with Mohammed states he won with 51.5% of the vote after 5 ranked choice rounds. While this process is an additional way for candidates to make the primary ballot, the convention is not the primary election. Nate Blouin, Michael Farrell, and the establishment candidate Ben McAdams still collected the required number of signatures to make the June 23rd ballot. Now, on one hand, that is something for Liban to be proud of as a candidate. But here's the problem. Conventions and caucuses have far less voter participation than even the primary elections have, which is already a low amount to start with. Rules will vary between states and localities, but registered party members must have the free time to attend these meetings for several hours. This outdated process is just simply not accessible to a majority of voters, making it an inaccurate representation of the larger voting population. Going back to the idea of Nate Blouin's poll, one important thing to consider is his campaign had either commissioned the poll or did it themselves. I don't know all the details of how the poll was conducted or who did it or any of the other specifics, but it also looks like Nate Blouin has more information about the poll on his campaign website if you want to look into it more. Regardless, all those points are all fair criticisms to keep in mind when looking at the results. Additionally, Blouin was asked about bias in polling, such as the advantages of name recognition. In short, and because of the largely uninformed U.S. populace, that is just how polling and elections sadly work. Nate responded by saying if you don't have that name ID going into the poll, and you're worried about that, then you should be very worried about your chances in an election. As he shows on his social media account here on June 1st, the results of his poll conducted show the establishment candidate at 37%, Nate at 27%, the other two progressives splitting a combined 20%, and a remaining of 18% undecided voters. If Liban and Michael actually care about the progressive values they speak about, they would want to work with Nate and rally behind his campaign to defeat McAdams, an uninspiring candidate who only supports a public option and protecting corporate profits. The people of Utah's 1st District can do better, but only if they rally behind Nate Blouin. When reviewing campaigns, another area to consider is the money. While fundraising isn't the only factor of a viable campaign, it's still necessary in our shitty campaign finance system. Of the 3 progressives, Nate is the best financed. A winning campaign requires more than a good policy page online. You need the ability to organize volunteers on the ground, and that still requires resources. Nate has the policy, the endorsements, the name recognition, and the ability to run a successful campaign. Meanwhile, the other 2 candidates, as shown by the poll, are barely known with little support. The longer Liban and Michael stay in the race, despite any good intentions they might have had originally, they will only become useful idiots to the establishment Epstein class. We've already seen this play out earlier this year in Illinois. Alleged progressives Bushra Amawala and Mike Simmons. They stayed in their race, despite several polls showing that they were in single digits and that Kadab-Ghazaleh was within the margin of error of winning the race. Towards the end, AIPAC was spending money supporting Bushra for the sole purpose of splitting the progressive vote. Due to the narcissistic egos and poor understanding of math, Kat lost to BIS by 4,000 votes, despite the 15,000 votes that ended up being split between Mike and Bushra. And look, to be clear, I'm not saying votes are owned by any one candidate, but if we're ever going to get progressive policies enacted, we need to be tactful about this. Now here in Utah's 1st District, we very well could see a similar result. It's technically not too late for other progressives to unofficially withdraw and endorse Nate. However, it is too late for their names to be removed from the ballot. I doubt we will see these candidates strategically support Nate. Progressive policies will never happen if narcissistic and egotistical candidates continue to help the corrupt status quo defeat a fellow progressive. Whether it's their intention to split the vote, or they just incorrectly think that they will be the winning candidate, the end result is the same and we all lose. This means it's up to the voters to rally around Nate Blouin if they want a real progressive leader to send to Congress. Now you can take my word for it, but as I say, these videos should only be a component of your research. I mentioned how these 4 candidates were together on a debate stage recently. It's my opinion Nate did the best, but I'm also biased as he is the secular lefty approved candidate. If you want to watch the full debate and judge for yourself, it will be linked below. Additionally, I will also link an interview that Nate Blouin has done. He was on with Francesca Fiorentini in her Candidate Corner series. Highly recommend you check that out and all the other good work she does on her channel, The Bituation Room. Unfortunately, Nate is the only approved candidate running in Utah. I hope voters rally around him to win his primary. If he doesn't, there are also 2 other things to consider. The first is the establishment candidate is not going to fight to improve lives by any meaningful way. Second, if the Utah legislator and governor try to switch maps again last minute, Nate Blouin is a candidate that could still inspire more voters to win, even in the case of a gerrymandered map. The establishment candidate would have 0 chance in that scenario. So voters in Utah's 1st, vote for Nate Blouin. If there was any important information I missed, let me know in the comments. As mentioned at the start of this video, Utah isn't voting alone on June 23rd. They will be joined by Maryland and New York, both of which have already been reviewed. The last state voting in the month of June, and the focus for the next episode, is Colorado on the 30th. After that, there will be a short break with the next block of states voting on August 4th. Stay tuned for more primary info on those upcoming states. Be sure you're subscribed and ring that bell to be notified of my newest videos. If you found anything I said in today's video useful, please give it a like and share it everywhere. Together, we can make Americans more educated, and hopefully that will result in better election outcomes. Until the next video, please consider checking out my other work on this channel. Any additional watch time and shares will help the channel reach more people and is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for listening. Take care.